Okay, well, friends, I guess this is one of the last sessions of the meeting, and something that I felt was very important to do last year, and that I'll do every time that we come together in provincial convention, and that is to hold myself accountable to you and to make myself available to answer other questions that haven't come up over the course of the weekend, or things that have come up that you want to raise again. And let me just say, I'm not going to make a speech. I'm simply going to say express two words of thanks. The first is to you, and I tried to say this in all the regional breakfasts. I visited all 6 this morning, and just to say thank you for coming. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for the ideas that you have left with us, both at the tables and, of course, in the books. I have absolutely no idea who is going to be doing all the work of putting all that together. It's going to be hard work, but I think it's going to be very valuable work to have not just the comments that came from the tables, but the comments that each and every one of you made in the workbooks that are going to be so important to us as part of this midpoint consultation on our policy development process. So thank you for being here, and thank you, of course, for all the work that you do day in and day out for the party. And the second word of thanks that I want to express on your behalf is to the people who have organized this conference. I've said before that oftentimes out of adversity and bad circumstances can come something good. And I think one of the things that happened to this party when it was defeated in 2003 and had a $10 million debt at that time is that it forced us to go back to a volunteer-led, volunteer-run, volunteer-organized party. And while you can always make the argument that having a big staff and a lot of help, paid help here, there, and everywhere is something that is helpful, there is no question but that the real passion, the real expertise, the manner of organizing and motivating the party that is best is that comes from the grassroots and from the volunteers. And so what you had in the case of this conference was one that was organized and put on principally under the leadership of John Matheson and a whole team of people on the party executive who are people elected by you and are volunteers who give of their time on behalf of the party. I don't want to diminish for 1 second the efforts of John's co-chair, Elizabeth Whitmer, and all the other people who are involved. But Elizabeth, like me, we don't do it for this reason, but this is our job. When people say to me, well, you know, gee, you go all around the province and you travel and tour all the time and this and that and the other thing, it's my job. And it's a job that I do with passion and with pleasure, and I would do it if I wasn't paid because I'm committed to this party. But at the end of the day, the people who are the real volunteers that don't get anything for doing this except the satisfaction of doing it are the whole group of people. And I'll mention only the one at the top, namely John, but he represents a whole group of people that put this together. I want to make mention of one other group because they are paid, but at the end of the day, they're people who work terribly, terribly hard, and that is the staff that we have at Queen's Park. We have a small staff. You know, it's relative to the number of members of provincial parliament we have, but I think pound for pound they fight way above their weight. They are people who do a superb job. They work terribly hard to help us put this together, whether it's the white papers or any other part of this, and I just want to say thank you on your behalf to them. So to the volunteers and to the staff. Okay, who's first? I think we're going to bring the microphones around, so I can't see the room that well because there's bright lights up here, and so we'll get to, hopefully we'll get to everybody, but Brian Patterson has somebody back there?
Yeah. Hey, John. We've all done a lot of work here this weekend, and I was wondering how the work we've done will actually influence the platform in 2007.
Well, I mean, that's a very good question, and I think the principal answer I want to give you is because I believe very strongly in accountability to you. I think I have proven that in the context of the measures that we took, for example, to put greater controls on the party's financial management, and that we have lived by those over the course of the last year and a half, and that's one of the reasons why we've made the great progress that we have made. I intend to adopt exactly the same approach with respect to the policy development process as it goes into its second and final year. And that is that not only are we going to take the material and read it and compile it and organize it that comes out of all the workbooks and all the notes taken at the discussions, but we're going to be accountable back to you for that process as it goes on. I don't know any other way. You could call this or you could find it as a fault if you want, but I don't know any other way. When I used to be running a company and I would sit in front of groups of hundreds of employees or thousands of bankers and shareholders, I would have to sit there every quarter, every year, and I would have to tell them what I was going to do. And guess what? I had to appear in front of those people 1 quarter later and tell them whether I did what I said I would do. It's the way I'm put together. It's the way I've been trained. It's the experience that I've had. And I view my leadership of the party as being no different. It's why I send you the emails. I try to send them every month or two telling you what I've been doing. Not just telling you where I've been and where I've traveled, but I tell you some of the inside story of why things are the way they are or what's going on with the party finances. I think you have a right to know. And I think you have a right to know what we did, what you all said, because, of course, everybody filled out their own workbook. I'd like to have you know down the road a piece when we've got it all pulled together what all the workbooks collectively told us as a party and what we're going to do with that information. And I think that the best measurement will be when we sit down again. And I know it's a little bit of a ways away, but we will sit down again in an annual meeting in 2007. And I hope that I will be able to look at you at that time and say, this is what you told us. Our platform is now out or is about to be out, and this is what it's going to say, and that you will see not perfect symmetry between any one booklet or any one table, but you will see a symmetry between what you told us and what other people have told us as part of this process and what's found its way into our platform. That's the ultimate accountability. I promise you that accountability. I'm sorry. I'll see you and we'll take your question. I just have to rely on the people with the microphones to find you and pick you, so, because we can't do it without the microphone. I can sort of hear you even with the microphone. It's not very good. Go ahead. I'm listening. Oh, I'm sorry. There's somebody there, then you can be next. So go ahead, ma'am.
Are you still committed to a policy that addresses fairness in education?
What I have talked about is exactly what you said at the end, which is a policy that addresses the issue of fairness for independent schools. Let me be very clear about that. I am still completely and totally committed to ensuring that part of our platform for the 2007 election is a policy which addresses the fairness issue for independent schools. I've had the opportunity to learn more about that issue. I came into politics only really 3 years ago as a candidate, first running for mayor, and then of course in provincial politics even more recently. And so there were a lot of these issues about which I didn't know that much. I had never been to, for example, an independent faith-based school, and I've now been to several to visit. And I've learned a lot from listening to people of all kinds, people of all types and of all views on these issues. And I have come to understand even better the fact that there is a fairness issue that needs to be addressed, that we need to continue to collect as much input as we can from all corners on that issue and how it relates to the question of choice for people who want to choose to send their children to these schools, and how that needs to be addressed but does not override our other and most significant, and I think and paramount obligation that we have if we seek to be the government of Ontario, which is to make sure at the same time that we maintain in place a quality public education system. But I think both have to be addressed, and both will be addressed as part of our platform for the 2007 election, period. People will have to really speak up on the mic, but I think I caught that you did not see a white paper on Toronto and cities, and you're right, you didn't, and I think what you did see, if you looked in the back of the other papers that were written, is a reference to the fact that there are, I think, 5 more papers to come out, and it was just a matter of how many we could get done in the time, because as you know, the papers were a synthesis of sorts of the discussions that took place across the province including in Toronto, of course, over the last 12 months. And those meetings were going on right up and until the sort of late fall of last year. And so we had scheduled to get out, as many as we could. I think in the end we got 6 of them that were done in time for this meeting that coincided to some extent with the discussion areas that we focused on in these sessions we've had yesterday and today. But I think if you look in the back of the policy papers, there's a list there, and I'm just going from memory. I think there's one on the environment, there's one on cities. Remind me, somebody, what else is coming? Post-secondary education. Is that it? Environment, cities, post-secondary education. I'm sure there's at least one more I'm missing. That's it? Anyway, there are more to come, and so they will be coming, and our timetable is this spring. They'll be, we're working on them now. They just were in a state they weren't complete in time for for this meeting. Yes, there's Brian.
Hi, John. My name is Benson Lau. I'm from the riding of Willowdale. I have a question to ask you. The Liberal Party is going to have their policy conference next weekend, and it's going to be focused on immigration. The question I have, do you think our party doing enough to encourage diversity in this organization? If you do not think we are doing enough, what can you do about it?
I can't really comment much on the Liberal Policy Conference next week. I do hope if they're having a policy conference, they will spend some time addressing the fiasco they've made of the electricity system, the number of jobs that are being lost in the manufacturing sector across the province, there's a whole bunch of things. I could go on. I talked about many of them last night. Having said that, the topic that they are discussing, if that's correct, that they're discussing immigration and diversity, is an important topic. And it is one that I've devoted myself to in quite a considerable manner over the course of the past 17 months. Are we doing enough? No, we're not. Have we come far enough? No, we haven't. Look around the room. The room looks different than it was 17 months ago or 77 months ago. But if we want to have a party that is fully inclusive of all of the people that we seek to represent in all of the communities that we seek to represent across Ontario, we have more work to do. And with respect, ladies and gentlemen, my friends, it is not rocket science. It is simply that we spend the time and that we have the will and that we make the effort to do something very simple, and that is to ask people to come and sit at the table with us. I'm gratified. It is not enough, and it is not acceptable to me for me to be in a position where at the time of the next election in September or October of next year, September, October, that I will be saying, vote for us. I want to have said well in advance of that, and I've been saying it since the first day I became leader. In fact, before that, come and join us now. Come and sit down at the table now. We want you to be a part of every single aspect of this party's organization. We want you to be a part of policy development, membership recruitment, fundraising. We want you to be candidates for this party. We want you to be campaign managers for this party. We want you to be every single place you can be as members of the Progressive Conservative Party. In fact, I did something unusual this time around, and some of the people here are here because of that. I sent letters to organizations that really represent the diversity of our communities across Ontario to people who are in those organizations, and I said, please come to our conference. You don't have to join our party. You don't have to promise me or anybody else you're going to vote for our party. We want you to come. We want to hear your ideas. We want you to be there. We want to get to know you better, and there are a fair number of people who are here directly in response to that invitation, and I hope they will join. I'll say this one concluding comment. There is only one of me. Some of you may say, thank heavens for that, but there's only one of me, and so I can only be in so many places at one time, visiting groups and trying to put down those roots and trying to express those invitations to people to come and be part of our party. And so the only way this is really going to work in terms of people being made to feel they are not only welcome, but that they are enthusiastically welcomed into our ranks to broaden out our base, is if every one of you are ambassadors as well, and you make it a point. You make it a point, frankly, to ask everybody to come and join the party, but that's the point. It's everybody. You make sure that in your asks of people to come and sit at our policy tables, come to our conferences, be part of our fundraising events, be candidates for the party, that you are reaching out and looking way beyond where we have often looked before, because that is something I'm deeply committed to doing. We're making progress, but when the question came, have we done enough? The answer is no way. We've got lots more to do. Okay, sorry about that.
Only on CPAC.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate you for using the National Party. So my other question is, I like your approach to the new asset communities, which is very, very good, very encouraging. We have to communicate with more and appreciate that they're more culturally, more conservative than the liberals. And liberals always use the state tactics, it's conservative or against you. So I think we have to communicate more. And another very important point for these new people is professionals who come to Canada. So we have to work together with a professional association, that is the medical or chartered owners association or engineers, and in our approach should be consulted so that the people do not face the problem and become ill. Like I was hearing one Russian doctor has a lot of experience, can't get any job. So, we don't want these taxi drivers to abuse but the base of skills and potential we have available. So my point is that we should also consult with all these professional associations because we have to work together. Because we do not want to lower our standards. And again, thank you very much.
Well, Gul, I think that was 7 questions in one, and I'll try and address a couple of them. First of all, you didn't ask a question with respect to the party finances, but can I say that, people say to me, thank me for getting the party's deficit down to less than $4 million from more than $10 million. I've gone to a lot of events, obviously, and I've been the speaker at a lot of events and so on, but at the end of the day, it's been a huge party-wide effort that has culminated in this. You have allowed me, as the membership of the party, for example, to canvass the party membership for money, which is something we generally did not allow to be done. You said, yes, I could do it. And I wrote an appeal each fall to you to ask you to help me in reducing the debt. That's made a major contribution to this. We've had a hard-working team of volunteers who've helped me to go out and to solicit money from people and to help us to get rid of our debt. And so it really has been an effort that has been important, but it's been a team effort. And I can tell you the other thing I'm very proud of is that I, as you know, changed the policy that said that the leader would not attend riding fundraising events because I felt that it wasn't just important to get rid of the party debt, but that it was also important that we began to prepare ridings for an election campaign in 2007 by getting their own finances in order. And so instead of saying, no, I won't come to riding events, I said, I'll come. We'd like you to share 20% of the proceeds with the Central Party Fund. You keep the other 80%, and I think I did 50 of those last year. Now, I'm going to probably be doing a few less this year, but because we've got to really focus on getting rid of the rest of the debt so that we can be debt-free and begin to accumulate the funds we need to fight the 2007 election. But I do want to thank you for your contribution to that. And again, it's all about accountability. I walked in, and I will tell you if there's one thing that made me, or a few things that made me nervous when I took this job. I've always been nervous when I've taken new jobs. I don't think you'd be human if you weren't. But when I walked in and saw that a provincial political party owed $10.3 million and had 3 years to clean it up, I was nervous. But it's just hard work, and it's accountability. It is the ironclad management discipline of Helen Johns at the PC Ontario Fund office and the PC Ontario Fund board. So I will tell you, for example, the way they operate, and it is with my full support and to some extent at my initiation. When they get $100,000 extra that is sitting in the bank because we've had a successful fundraising event, and when our next bank payment on the repayment of the loan is not due for 3 more months, we send it over when we have it, right away. And we get it over early. It saves interest costs, and it also means there's no temptation to spend it on something we shouldn't be spending it on when we're still in debt. That's how we've been operating, and we've been early on every bank payment that we've had to make so far during the 17 months that I've had the privilege of being your leader. Now, on the skilled immigrant side, may I say this to you? I think as a country, we get too fixated on which government was responsible for what. As a country, and the country includes everybody who lives here, it includes the federal government, it includes the provincial government, and it includes the professional organizations and others, we have significantly shortchanged people that we invited to come to this country. The people who arrive here with professional qualifications are people who have been through an extensive process of review and vetting as suitable people to immigrate to Canada. They got points under our system for what they were and for the experience they had and the training that they had. And I agree with what you said. No one is suggesting, least of all me, that we should be lowering or changing our standards in order to accommodate people who may not be equipped the way we would like to see to do things here in Canada, whatever it might be, whether it's medicine or accounting or pharmacy. What we do owe people, though, is a much more fulsome explanation of the situation as it exists here in Canada before they even go to the Canadian High Commission or the Canadian Embassy, and certainly when they get there. We owe them that. We owe them a much more complete explanation of educational equivalency between a university or college they might have gone to in another country and what we have here. We owe them the opportunity while they're waiting to come to Canada, because I certainly heard when I was over in India and Pakistan and Sri Lanka about how long people are waiting to come to Canada, and that's a different issue. But if they have a 1.5 or 2 year wait, there is no reason with technology today why people can't use online courses to get their skills in a situation where they are compatible with what we require here in Canada. And then last but not least, I will say this. When people get here, assuming all of that may not have been enough to address whatever maybe needs to be addressed, we owe it to those people to have two things done. One is to have adequate bridging programs so that they can go to, and there are bridging programs that exist. They're very small. They have very few spaces in them. But again, I look at this kind of as a businessman and I say, well, we know how many people we're letting in the country. We even know what they did for a living in the countries from which they came because we screen them for that. So it shouldn't be that hard to figure out that if we're letting a certain number of pharmacists into the country, if we've done our homework in terms of helping them as best we can before they get here to upgrade whatever needs to be upgraded or modified, and they still need bridging programs, we will roughly know how many of them will be coming here. Why can't we have the programs here that match the number of people we've let in? It's a mathematical computation to do, and it has a cost. But it will far more than pay for itself, because we will allow these people to have the dignity of being able to do what they're trained to do when they get here, and they will make, as a result, a bigger contribution to our society when they get here, and they will be able to better look after their families when they get here, doing what they are trained to do. And the same applies to the professions. The professions in many cases are self-governing, but I think we have to sit down with them and we have to say, look, the one thing we owe to people we have invited to come to our country is the assurance that we can give them, with no absolute guarantee for everybody, but with an assurance we can give everybody, that within a reasonable period of time, if you have managed to make your skill set and your training match the qualifications we expect in Canada, if we have done everything we can for you to make sure that that is possible for you to do, that if you're able to meet that test, we're going to tell you it's not going to be longer than a given period of time before you will be qualified to do what you are trained to do or what you have been trained to do previously in another country. And I think we have that obligation. And you know, these stories, people think they're made up. I got into a taxi. I take a taxi to work early in the morning, and I got into a taxi the other day, and the man told me he was from Bangladesh and had taken engineering. He'd now been here 6 years. I mean, the taxi driver stories are not made up. I was in a car accident about 2 months ago on the Don Valley Parkway, and our car was a little bit messed up and couldn't drive where we needed to go. I had a speaking engagement 10 minutes later. I was standing by the side of the road. This is an absolutely true story. On a ramp off the parkway, a man pulled over and said, "Aren't you John Tory? Why are you standing on the side of the road?" I said, "Good question." I said, "We've had a small accident. By any chance are you going?" The guy was going on Don Mills Road North. I said, "I have to be at Don Mills Collegiate in 10 minutes to speak to the student body there. Could you take me?" And he said he would be pleased to take me. So I got in the car and I said to him, "So, you know, what do you do?" And he said that he was from overseas. I'm trying to remember now. He was from somewhere in South Asia anyway. And he said he'd been here 13 years. He was trained as well as an engineer. He'd just given up on ever getting himself qualified as an engineer, and he had 3 children, and he was working to support his family. He was very open with me, and he said to me, the mistake I made was I brought my wife and children with me when I came, and had I known in advance, and this is the point I'm making about us being honest with people before they come, had I known when I came that I would have had to go back to school and so on, I wouldn't have brought my wife and children with me. I would have come myself, gone to school, gone through that, got myself qualified, and brought them when I was then able to become an engineer and support them properly. But he said, "I'm driving as a courier." That's why he was driving, and he stopped to pick me up. And he gave me a ride to Don Mills Collegiate. And so these people are very real. I got motivated to act on this issue and to work for Career Bridge, creating internships within the brief period when I was without work. I lost the mayoralty, and I hadn't yet decided to run for this job, and I was without work, and I immersed myself completely in Career Bridge. Why did I do that? Career Bridge is getting corporations to create internships for skilled immigrants. You know the success of that program? The people who have come in as skilled immigrants, when they get a career bridge internship or one of the other similar programs like that, 4 months working in a company, getting that first little bit of Canadian experience, 90% of them get a full-time job after that internship. Why are those... Why did I go and work for that charity of all the charities and organizations that I've worked for before? Because I went through a 12-month mayoralty campaign where every single day on the street I met people who told me the same story, that they had come to this country, they had come here to pursue opportunities in areas that they were trained to pursue opportunities in, and that they couldn't for this reason or that. And I just thought to myself, we can't let that continue. And so we've got our work to do on that, and I think I've tried to indicate some of what my own thinking is on it. Where's the next question?
Over here.
Where does
John,
that... What,
John?
See, it sounds like it's coming from there, and I know you're not there.
Yeah. Steve.
Steve. Yes.
Steve Kerper
Hi.
from Willowdale.
Hello, Steve.
Hi, John. My question
Steve,
is
you
not
sound like you're over here, but never mind. You're over there. I see you.
My question is not a global issue. It's really a local issue, so I apologize to everybody in this room that feels that their time may not be well spent on the question. However, I also believe that whatever happens in one part of the province affects all of us. So my question to you, John, has to do with the proposed Toronto Act. There are some of us in Toronto that are very, very concerned about some components of that act. I would very much like to have your personal views, the views of your caucus, and what's being done to make it a better act. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Steve. And I think the City of Toronto Act actually is an important issue for, people from across the province, because while I am quite prepared to say, as I've said many times before, that Toronto is unique and different, there is also no question but that some decisions that are made with respect to how municipalities should be treated going forward will be decisions that certainly many of the other cities and some of the towns will think should be a broader application to them. And so there is a province-wide implication to the City of Toronto Act. I believe, first and foremost, there was a very powerful need for a new City of Toronto Act to be brought forward. I think that was particularly so in the case of what I'll call the governance aspects of the city's affairs. There is no question in my mind but that a city the size and sophistication of Toronto, and I would say this is true to some extent as well of other large cities, Ottawa, Mississauga, London, Hamilton, and so on in Ontario, that the notion that they should have been operating under an archaic system where if they wanted to establish a lobbyist registry or if they wanted to put a speed bump in or change speed limits in their city, that they had to come and seek provincial legislation. They had to pay money to advertise in the newspaper in many cases to do that. This was the height of silliness. It's the height of kind of inefficient, ineffective government that is being taken away from the level closest to the people where those decisions should be made. And so I think an act that encompasses a much greater degree of local autonomy for that kind of decision-making is a step forward. Now, what was included in that package was a series of what Mr. McGuinty called accountability measures. I think they are, in the case of Toronto, things that frankly have already been done by and large. It allowed legally for the appointment of an integrity commissioner. It allowed legally for the appointment of an auditor general, both of whom have already been appointed under some previous law or under whatever power the city felt it had before. Those are good things. I think the two things Mr. McGuinty missed, however, that are very, very serious and probably go much more to the heart of the relationship between the province and the city and the ability of this city, Toronto, and other cities to get things done are the following. The first is, I suggested that he did this whole thing backwards. Now, this is not unknown to him to do things backwards because, you see, they're always going for the big headline and the quick fix and the kind of thing that looks like, oh, wow, these guys have really done it this time. And in fact, I think had they done their homework and had they thought this through in a rational way, I think of it as no different than just saying, we're going to close all the coal plants in 2007, and then someone said to them, where are you going to get the power? Oh, I hadn't really thought about that part. Well, in this part, they brought an act in that gave the city the power to levy some additional taxes. And those taxes, you could argue about whether they're right or wrong, and I'll come back to that point in a minute. But the bottom line is they're not going to raise very much money. What they didn't do before they brought in the City of Toronto Act, which I argue they should have done, is to re-examine the relationship between the province and the municipality, in this case Toronto, but it really is a broader examination that must take place of the fiscal relationship between the province and the cities, to say, look, let's define the scope of the financial problem. Let's first of all identify what it is and what the quantity of it is across the province, and then let's look at whether there are ways it should be fixed by taking steps such as taking some responsibilities back up to the provincial level, for example, to have them paid for across the consumption and income tax base of the province, which grows with the economy. That homework was not done, notwithstanding the fact that Mr. McGuinty ranted and railed during the course of the 2003 election and before about downloading. And the bottom line is, since taking office, when it comes to downloading, Mr. McGuinty has done almost nothing, basically nothing. So that's number one. Instead, what they chose to do was actually to put powers into this bill to give the city more powers to tax people. And I've made the argument over and over and over again, because I believe it to be so, that if you look at the overall federal, provincial, municipal, fiscal arrangements in Canada, it is very clear that the people of Ontario overall, to the three levels of government, are paying enough tax. Why do I say that? Because there is a huge surplus accumulating at the Ottawa level of taxation, 40% of which comes from the province of Ontario. So if their surplus is $10 billion, to pick a round number, $4 billion of that is coming from the province of Ontario in taxes they're paying to Ottawa that are not needed to meet expenditure requirements in Ottawa. And as a result, before you start saying to people, let's find ways to make you pay more tax, why don't we say, with the tax dollars we're paying that are ending up in Ottawa, can we find a way to make sure those tax dollars get to where they're needed to deliver health care services in Ontario and to meet local needs of people there? The second thing I have said is that I believe that the degree to which the City of Toronto has been asked to demonstrate to taxpayers that it has done everything that it can to render itself fully accountable for the money it spends today and for best practices and for value for money and so on, I don't think that test has yet been met. I saw a reference last week, and I talked quite a lot about this when I ran for Mayor of Toronto. I was going to bring in a line-by-line process review. I remember standing on a street in the middle of Toronto in the 2003 mayoralty campaign, pointing out that on one side of that street, the cost of collecting garbage was $72, and on the other side of the street it was $44. I think those numbers are right. And I said, well, why do we just let that go on? Surely there's some lesson we can learn from the $44 side of the street where we can sort of find ways to do it cheaper on the other side of the street. And why do we not do that? Why don't we insist on that for the taxpayers' money? And so what I said 10 days ago was this. Why don't we say, in respect of those sections that specifically go about the task of permitting the city to raise taxes by levying new taxes on the citizens of Toronto, why don't we delay the proclamation of those sections so they wouldn't become officially part of the law until after the fiscal imbalance discussions have taken place between Mr. Harper, the Premier of Ontario, and the cities as well? And I said at the Canadian Club a week ago the city should be a part of those discussions in some way or another so that we can see if there are other ways to shuffle existing tax dollars people are paying to the level of government where they're needed. And secondly, why don't we say we'll delay the proclamation of those additional powers to tax until we are satisfied that the City of Toronto has mechanisms and bodies in place and has conducted the kind of line-by-line review of the way they spend money so that we will know that even in the case of city tax dollars paid by people, they will know that money is being as well spent as it can be before we ask for more. So that's what I said.
Bob Wood, London West. First, let me compliment you on the commitment you've made to involve more public-private partnerships in healthcare. It's good policy, it's good politics, it's going to help drive some of the changes we have to have in healthcare. Now, it also is true when you look at any of these analyses, we've got to have more money after inflation in the health care if we're going to meet the expectations of the public. Would you be prepared to consider putting a commitment in our platform? I'm not going to ask you to commit to a number or anything today, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Would you be prepared to consider putting in the platform that we're going to put, say, 6% new money after inflation each year into health care over 4 years?
You know, Bob, I love you, but you're no different than any other party member or any other group that I met with. I told you last night, I find ideas like this interesting. That's why we're here, to listen to ideas like that. I trust you put that idea into your booklet and expressed it at your table during the discussion on health care. I am not going around the province. I have no intention of starting today or yesterday or tomorrow or any other day and saying, Good idea. Yes, mark that down. We're going to do that. I will say to you that we have to look at these kinds of things. I remember that before the election in 1995, we were asked about whether we would be prepared to guarantee a certain level of health care expenditure, which I think was done as part of our platform at that time. I think what is, I can certainly say this, that I will be looking, and people asked me about this the other day, I think that there are ways in which we can make sure, even with the money we have for starters, before we start looking at the inflation that inevitably has to take place as we age and whatnot in healthcare expenditures to some extent, we can look at ways in which we can do it better. Now, Dr. Sinclair put up a list of things yesterday that talked about, and I didn't even fully understand them all because there were some medical terms in there, but sort of said if you had software that exists today in place in emergency rooms that could take some measurement of people's heart function the minute they walk in the door, that could make a 20% difference on how people were treated and how they were cared for and so forth and so on. You look at the experiences of something like PharmaNet that's referred to in the white paper, where they have an electronic registry of all of the prescriptions, and he mentioned this again yesterday, not the BC example, but it kicks up as well, the computer does, a flag that says don't give that person this prescription, because if you do it, given what else they're taking or what other illnesses they have, they're going to have an adverse reaction and end up in the hospital. I don't think it probably says all those words, but it says don't do this, check first. That saves huge amounts of money because people who shouldn't end up in the hospital because of a prescribing mistake don't end up there. And so I think that for us to pick a number today, out of the air and sort of say we're going to guarantee a 6% inflation factor would be not a good way to make policy, first of all, just because as much as I think you're a smart fellow, I have no idea if that's the right number or whether we should be making that kind of a commitment. But I do think what we've got to look at is first, as I said yesterday, how do we run this system better? How can it be that people can go around and present lists of things like this that are fairly straightforward to do, where software exists, where it's being done in other places, and we're not doing it in Ontario? I think that when you started off your question talking about private-public participation, I think that the notion that the McGuinty government absolutely rules out any kind of participation or getting advice or ideas or anything from the private sector within a universally accessible single-payer system is scandalous. I think it is not responsible. I think they have put themselves into an ideological box for political purposes that is not responsible in the context of the kind of open discussion and the willingness to accept new ideas within a universally accessible single-payer system that we need. I think they are way behind where the public is on this. I think the public are saying, not only do we not want you to wed yourselves to the status quo for ideological reasons, we want you to look for new ideas, we want you to look for new ways of doing things, and yes, we want you to have a universally accessible single-payer system so that the OHIP card is the passport to better health care, but don't box yourself in a corner in terms of who does it. I say all the time, I don't know very many people who get on the table as long as they can book the test in a timely fashion and pay with their OHIP card and say, by the way, who bought this machine? Who bought this machine? Who owns this machine you're about to do the MRI with? I don't know too many people who turn to the person assuming that they can conclude that they're competent professionals if they can pay for the test with their OHIP card and have it on a timely basis and say, before you do that test, by the way, exactly who do you work for? They want the test done in a timely and professional manner. They want to pay for it with their OHIP card as part of universal access and as part of a single-payer system, but they want it done on a timely basis, and they want to have some choice. They want to have some choice and competition will raise the bar in terms of how efficiently the system is run.
Thank you. Bob Callow, thank you for the opportunity to ask this question. There's my fan club right back here.
You got some work to do there, Bob.
John, yeah, well, that's
I came to campaign for you, so I can tease you a little bit. But,
you were there when no one else was there.
You've got a big fan club, Bob, not to worry.
Anyway, I want to thank you, Mr. Leader, and I want to thank your team of John Matheson, our third Vice President, and Elizabeth Whitmer for an outstanding policy conference. Outstanding. And secondly, I want to say that that for those of you who think that this process of policy stops between now and next year, it doesn't. The third Vice President, John Matheson, has re-energized the Policy Advisory Council process. We are the only party in North America that is enshrined in its Constitution an opportunity to have a dialogue on policy year-round. So I encourage you, behind the leadership of John Matheson, to get involved in the Policy Advisory Council process. And I know, Mr. Leader, you want to have a few opportunities to comment on that.
Mr. Matheson, first of all, hasn't told you the only thing that I don't like people calling me is either leader or Mr. Leader, but never mind. Thank you for that, Bob. And may I say that nothing made me prouder than to see that we could come here this weekend and that we could not just have the open discussions that took place at the tables, not just listen to people with a whole variety of ideas up here. I mean, heavens above, Dr. Rivers, for example, I'm sure there were people here who agreed with what he said and people who didn't, and that's the essence of an open party, that we can have people in from all places and corners of the community and have them get up here and talk about their ideas and what they think should be done. And then that isn't meant to be those speeches telling us what we're going to do. It's meant to say, okay, you've heard these people with their ideas, now you're going to sit at your table and you're going to tell us what you think in response to that stimulation. I was so proud that at 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, having started at 8 o'clock in the morning, there were probably still 500 or 600 people sitting in this room talking about policy. They were talking, in that case, about community engagement. And I thought to myself, what a great party that we have that many people sitting in here after 8 or 9 hours of work all day, still talking about the issues with enthusiasm. I sat at some of the tables. They were outstanding discussions, as they were this morning, with lots of ideas. So I think the next chapter, Bob is right, the next chapter is not to walk away saying, well, we've done our work and now it's up to somebody else. In fact, part of the reason in the past why quite often people would go away, it goes back to the very first question I was asked in this session today, which is, well, you know, what's going to happen after this? How do we know that anything that went on here is going to be connected to what goes on going forward? Well, the answer to that question is the way you know is that I promised to be accountable to you, and I think that my track record before I got to this leadership and since I've been here is one of accountability. But the other guarantee that you have is by staying involved in the process. It doesn't end here. This is actually the halfway point. There's a lot more work that needs to be done. We need you to be involved in those PACs. I need to hear from you, as do Frank and the caucus members, and Frank's been very involved in setting up the PACs, and of course all the other critics. We need to hear from you by email. Those of you who write to me by email know that unless I'm traveling, you hear back from me often the same day, usually the next day. That's what I do when I get into the office early in the morning. There's no one else to talk to, so I just answer my email. But and believe you me, there's a lot of very happy taxpayers who are very surprised to get an answer back from a politician, and they write me back to say, is it really you answering? And I then have to somehow convince them without using the webcam that it is. But having said that, I will continue to do that, and that's a good way of staying in touch. But please stay involved in the process. The platform will reflect what you think it should say and what you think it should be the best if you stay involved in the process and don't walk away from here and think your job is done.
Mr. Tory, it's John Tory. I've got a quick question. First of all, thank you very much for your frankness and openness in your discussion and dialogue. Getting back to the party debt, I just want to know if Ontarians, when they contribute to the PC Party of Ontario, if 100% of that money goes to the party, or does some of that go to some organization to do that fundraising?
Well, the fact of the matter is that there is always a cost to raising money, and the cost to raising money would consist, I guess, the most limited cost might be the cost of sending a letter to somebody. So that might cost you, 50 cents or 75 cents, depending on the postage, plus the cost of preparing the letter. A more expensive way of raising money, although one that works very well for us, is when we have dinners. And of course, when we have the dinner, and if we sell tickets for $500, we have to pay $100 to the place that gave us the dinner. Actually, the old way of doing it, when I arrived, honest to God, it's true. The first day I walked in and they presented me with this $10.3 million deficit and said, but the news, there was really some super news that I had to know. And I said, oh, what's that? Having looked at this, and I sort of felt a bit ill. And they said, well, the good news is we think we've just come up with the money now to pay for the dinners we fed people last April. And what they've done, and look, God bless them all, I mean, they were keeping the party going, sort of trying to keep the lights on, but they'd actually taken all the money that was taken in from the fundraising dinner in April of 2003 and spent it, and had just forgotten one small detail, which was that the hotel sent a bill a little later on for the chicken dinners. And so it hadn't been paid. What we are doing is, there are expenses. The $6 million thereabouts we took off the debt was a net figure after we paid the expenses. Now, what I can tell you there isn't There is no big bloated bureaucracy down there. I think I'm right. I don't know if Helen's still here, but the staff consists of, I think, 4 people. And there are people who keep track, obviously, of the huge volume of mail and organizing the events and so forth. There is postage bills and telephoning bills to sort of do that telemarketing and mailing and so forth. But basically, that's it. And then, of course, there is the bank interest charges month to month and the bank debt payments that have to be made. So I think you can say to people that there is a cost to the fundraising, but it is not a cost of some bloated organization. It is not a cost of a party headquarters, of which we do not have one at present. It is a cost simply of raising the money, phone calls, dinners we feed people, et cetera, and that all the rest goes to paying down the debt, because really we don't have any expenditures at the moment, because we just closed them all off. We just said that we're not going to spend money until we've got rid of the debt. And by the way, the budget that encompasses all of that, as you know, under measures that I introduced proudly to the party constitution and that you accepted a year ago, that budget has to be approved line by line by the party executive who you elect. And so they have seen the budget for 2006 and they know what it is.